Every year, roughly 1,700 soldiers apply to join Delta Force. These are not regular troops. They are Rangers, Green Berets, and combat veterans who have already survived selections that wash out most of the military. The best of the best. 90% of them will fail. The internet will tell you they quit in the first 48 hours. Forums are filled with stories about brutal opening days designed to break candidates before they even begin. Physical torture so intense that 9 out of 10 men tap out before the sun rises twice. But here is what former operators actually say. The first 48 hours of Delta selection are the easy part. Candidates return to barracks each night. They eat hot meals. They sleep in beds. The cadre are almost friendly. The real breaking happens later. And the method is far more psychologically sophisticated than anything Hollywood has ever shown you. This is the truth about how Delta Force selection actually works, and why even America's most elite soldiers cannot survive it. Camp Dawson sits in the mountains of West Virginia, surrounded by dense Appalachian forest. This is where Delta Force conducts its assessment and selection course, and where careers built over years of combat service end in a single moment of psychological collapse. The selection runs approximately 4 weeks. The timeline most people imagine is completely wrong. Candidates arrive expecting immediate physical punishment. What they get instead is a series of standardized fitness tests that most of them pass without difficulty. A 40-yard inverted crawl in under 25 seconds. 32 push-ups and 37 sit-ups in 1 minute each. A 2-mile run in under 16 minutes and 30 seconds. A 100-meter swim while fully dressed in combat fatigues. These are not designed to eliminate candidates. They are designed to qualify them for what comes next. After the fitness screening, the first week unfolds as instructional land navigation. Cadre led small groups through the mountains on what George Hand, a former Delta A squadron operator, called didactic walks. They teach terrain association, map reading, and compass work. Candidates return to barracks each evening. The cadre explicitly warned them. This comfortable pace should not be confused with the much higher rate of speed necessary to successfully complete the course. Most candidates do not really hear that warning. They are too busy feeling confident. Week 2 is when everything changes. Candidates enter what is officially called the stress phase. The first thing they notice is that they no longer return to barracks. They sleep in field shelters and navigate alone through increasingly difficult terrain. They receive zero communication from other candidates. But the most psychologically devastating element is not the physical difficulty. It is the silence. In Navy SEAL training, instructors scream at candidates constantly. They motivate through negative reinforcement. They tell you when you are failing, and they dare you to quit. Delta cadres say almost nothing. They do not encourage. They do not criticize. They do not tell you if you are on pace or falling behind. When you reach a checkpoint, they hand you coordinates for the next one without a word about your performance. You are completely alone with your own thoughts. For most candidates, that is where the real enemy lives. Research from University College London found that psychological stress peaks when uncertainty peaks. Humans experience greater distress facing unknown probabilities than known dangers. We would rather know we are going to fail than wonder if we might. Delta selection exploits this with scientific precision. Candidates never learn the total distance they must cover. They never know the time limit. They never receive feedback about whether their pace is adequate. Each checkpoint simply reveals coordinates to another checkpoint, with no indication of how many remain. Eric Haney was one of the founding members of Delta Force. In his book, he described a revealing moment when Colonel Beckwith asked him about Stress Week. Haney said he was still waiting for it to begin. His reasoning was simple. After years of leading a platoon and being responsible for other men's lives, he now only had himself to worry about. However hard the trial, he received 4 meals a day, nobody shot at him, and the weather was pleasant. This psychological reframe distinguished those who passed. They did not view selection as torture. They viewed it as a vacation from the actual stress of combat leadership. But most candidates cannot make that mental shift, and the numbers prove it. Paul Howe, a former Delta operator, reported that across 2 classes of 120 applicants each, only 12 to 14 completed selection. That is roughly a 10% pass rate. Kevin Holland served in both DevGru and Delta. He recounted that of 120 candidates who started his class, 16 passed assessment and selection. Then came the 6-month operator training course. Only 8 of those 16 made it through. Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin's class began with 109 candidates. Approximately 25 made it to the final event called the Long Walk. Additional failures occurred during that march and the subsequent psychological evaluation. Annual estimates suggest that of 1,700 soldiers who apply, fewer than 30 reach the operator training course, and only 6 to 12 ultimately become Delta operators. That is less than 1% overall. The Long Walk is where selection reaches its psychological climax. Candidates begin before dawn, around 1:30 in the morning, carrying a rucksack weighing between 45 and 70 pounds. They march alone through the Appalachian Mountains. The total distance is approximately 40 miles, but candidates do not know that. Each checkpoint simply reveals the next set of coordinates. George Hand wrote extensively about his long walk experience. He described the mountain laurel as some of the most robust and indestructible vegetation he had ever encountered. He tried breaking through it, crawling under it, swimming over the top of it, screaming at it. The terrain is relentless. The weight is crushing. And the psychological warfare continues. Hand recalls reaching what he believed was the summit of Mozark Mountain. He was certain this was the finish. The cadre member standing there handed him a card and spoke without emotion. He said the words, "Here are the coordinates to your next rendezvous point." Hand plotted the coordinates once, then again, then a third time. There were 9 more miles to his next checkpoint. The devastation of that moment, the complete collapse of hope followed by the requirement to simply continue walking, is where most candidates finally break. Hand also witnessed a candidate he called Ranger Farusi approaching from the wrong direction, crying in frustration, weaponless. The man asked Hand if he'd seen his rifle. When the cadre asked the candidate where his rifle was, that single question ended his Delta career instantly. Losing your weapon during selection means automatic failure, regardless of everything else. But physical failure isn't what eliminates most candidates. One of Hand's most revealing stories involves a man he called the Mountain Man. This candidate possessed superior physical genetics. He blazed the fastest 40-mile path through the wilderness. He reached the traditional fire pit at the end of the long walk before anyone else. And the commander's board rejected him anyway. The reason, according to Hand, was simple. The Mountain Man was a profound asshole. His arrogance was visible despite his physical dominance. Delta didn't want him. This reveals something critical about what Delta selection actually measures. Former operator Dale Comstock explained it directly. Delta operators are selected because of their mental acuity, above-average intelligence, flexibility, adaptability, and fitness. Nobody was ever impressed by big muscles, or by a black belt, or anything external. The physical demands exist to create exhaustion, and exhaustion reveals character. When you're completely depleted, when you haven't slept properly in days, when your feet are destroyed and your shoulders are bleeding from the rucksack straps, that's when your true psychological architecture becomes visible. Multiple former cadre members confirm a counterintuitive pattern. It is often not the most physically qualified candidates who pass selection. Once exhausted from continuous training events, many perfectly qualified candidates simply lose the resolve they once had and decide to quit. As one analysis concluded, most of the people who quit in selection aren't carted off in an ambulance. They still have blood sugar and oxygen to spare. The pain they feel, while excruciating, will fade within a few days, but their mind no longer believes that their body can keep going. The mind quits before the body must. This is why Delta's founding vision focused so heavily on psychological independence. Colonel Charlie Beckwith served as an exchange officer with the British 22nd Special Air Service Regiment during the Malayan Emergency in 1962 and 1963. Commanding a troop in A Squadron, he operated alongside Special Air Service soldiers in actual counterinsurgency combat. The experience transformed his understanding of what elite forces could achieve. When Beckwith returned to the United States, he submitted detailed reports outlining America's vulnerability in lacking a Special Air Service type unit. For over a decade, Army leadership repeatedly rejected his proposals. Special forces at the time focused on unconventional warfare and training indigenous fighters. Beckwith recognized the Army needed not only a force of teachers, but a force of doers. Delta Force was officially established on November 19, 1977. The first training course ran from April through September of 1978. The unit achieved full mission capability in fall of 1979, just weeks before the Iran hostage crisis erupted. Beckwith borrowed almost everything from Special Air Service methodology, the squadron organizational structure, the 4-week land navigation selection, the culminating 40-mile march, the no-feedback policy, progressive weight increases, the emphasis on individual isolation, but the most important inheritance was philosophical. Beckwith wrote that he sought men who enjoyed being alone, who could think and operate by themselves, men who were strong-minded and resolute. The commander's board that follows the long walk tests exactly this. Every candidate who survives the physical selection faces a panel of senior operators. They probe every answer, and they search for character flaws that endurance could not reveal. One question has remained unchanged since the unit's founding. Tell us what you do not do well. What do you tend to screw up? Anyone who answers that they have no weaknesses is dropped immediately, regardless of their physical performance, regardless of how fast they completed the long walk. Delta wants operators who possess genuine self-awareness. Arrogance is disqualifying because arrogance gets teammates killed. The gray man concept generates ongoing debate among former operators. Traditional wisdom advises candidates to remain unremarkable while maintaining high competence. Blend in, do not attract attention. Former selection cadre. Writing for military publications counter this advice. Trying to be the gray man just may put a huge target on your forehead. Most people are not trained properly to be a gray man. The actual gray man, tradecraft, the ability to disappear in crowds and avoid notice during operations, is taught after selection. During selection, the cadre already know who is trying too hard to be invisible, and that effort itself becomes conspicuous. What actually breaks candidates comes down to a handful of psychological vulnerabilities. Inability to tolerate uncertainty about duration and distance. Need for external validation or encouragement. Loss of internal motivation when feedback disappears. Mental capitulation when physical discomfort peaks. Inability to self-correct when lost or behind schedule. Patrick McNamara, a Delta operator, articulated the required mindset precisely. The probability of achieving the outcome you desire will increase once you let go of the need to have it. That surrender of attachment to outcome, continuing to walk without knowing how far remains or whether you are on pace, is what selection ultimately tests. George Hand completed his long walk in 18.5 hours. It was pitch black when he reached the final checkpoint. He saw nothing but the faint glow of his compass. Then a voice spoke from the darkness in front of him. "Congratulations, Sergeant Hand. You have passed the first phase of the selection and assessment course." At the traditional fire pit, exhausted survivors received sandwiches and a concoction dubbed Long Walker, a mixture of spiced apple cider and Johnny Walker whiskey. For the first time in weeks, they could speak to other candidates. But even that relief was temporary. The commander's board still waited, and the 6-month operator training course would eliminate roughly half of those who had survived selection. The 90% failure rate is real, but it does not happen in 48 hours of physical torture. It happens across 4 weeks of psychological warfare waged through silence, isolation, and weaponized uncertainty. Delta does not break your body. It reveals whether your mind was ever strong enough to begin with. And for roughly 90% of America's most elite soldiers, the answer is no. If you want to understand how Navy SEALs face their own psychological crucible, that video is on screen now. Subscribe if you want more content about what happens behind the walls of America's most secretive military units.